Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. Coming Together Book 2. Episode 9. Chapter 26 to 34. Mom isn't here, Corey said. Neither is Travis. So much for my grand resurrection. He slumped onto the sofa. We'll have to wait for them. Which is a little anticlimactic. We decided to clean up and eat. Start looking and feeling human again. There's not much in the way of food, Sam said. She'd come out of the kitchen with a Coke and a spoon heaped with peanut butter. What? Corey said. Mom knows better than to let our cupboards get empty, or I'll dig up her stash of fancy chocolate bars. The fridge is practically bare, Sam said. Grocery shopping is apparently the last thing on your mom's mind. I'm sure there's more in the cupboards. I just stopped at the peanut butter. We went into the kitchen. Corey headed straight to a cupboard and pulled out cereal and cookies. Pop's in the fridge, Sam said. Daniel got that. As he stood there, door open, he glanced at me. I was looking past him at a loaf of bread, uncovered and rock hard, on the counter. Beside it was a pitcher. The smell of sour milk hit me as I moved closer. Corey's mom wasn't here. She hadn't been here since the fire. Daniel shook his head at me. Don't say anything yet. I accepted a Coke from him and cookies from Corey. Then I took a bowl of cereal out to Kenji. Not ideal, but no worse than the granola bars I'd been feeding her. As we headed back into the living room, I noticed the phone on the counter. Daniel followed my gaze and laughed. Yeah. We're holed up, waiting to notify someone that we're back, and there's a phone. We've been in the woods way too long. He picked it up. Sam leaped forward and grabbed it from him. Corey opened his mouth to argue, but she motioned for him to wait until she hung up. As she lowered the phone, she stopped. She looked at it. Lifted it to her ear. Frowned. It's dead, she said. Corey took the phone from her. He jabbed a few buttons. Then he strode into the study and picked up another phone. Dead? I said. He nodded. Must be from the fire, Sam said. I'm surprised they even have electricity. Corey said nothing. He was staring at the empty desk. All the wires for a laptop dangled over the edge. He turned and tapped an empty shelf behind him. My laptop should be here. He gestured at the empty desk. It was when I left. He turned to Daniel. Okay, obviously between the fire and the crash, Mom hasn't come home. But she didn't take my laptop. She told me to pack it. I didn't. Why? Sam said. Because my homework's on it, he said, in a tone that implied this was a stupid question. Laptop perishes in the fire? I get a free pass on every assignment. Which I'm sure she knew you'd try, so she took it. I'm supposed to be the paranoid one, guys, and I. Corey was already gone, heading for the stairs again. He took them two at a time. Then he pitched forward, hands clutching his head as he let out something between a moan and a strangled cry. Daniel raced upstairs to help him to his feet, and Corey promptly puked on him. You were done with that shirt, right? Corey mumbled as we half-carried him into his room. He started to say something else, and heaved again, this time twisting enough to vomit on the floor instead. Sidestepping the puddle, we got Corey onto his bed. He went into fetal position, hands over his head, moaning. Where are your pills? Daniel said. Bathroom. We'll find them, I said, and started to go. Corey grabbed my sleeve. Stay. Good idea, Sam said. My bedside manner sucks. I'll help Daniel. They left. I knelt beside Corey's bed, holding his hands as he groaned and writhed, his face shiny with sweat. Bad. I whispered. Oh yeah. He opened one eye. Don't tell Daniel. You know how he gets. But they're a lot worse. He licked his lips and looked over my shoulder, making sure Daniel wasn't there. It's like a flash of light splitting my skull. Then more flashes. This time. His face screwed up in pain and he curled up, panting. Seeing stuff. Crazy stuff. Like what? Can't tell. Just another jolt of pain. Stuff. Images. Don't make sense. He took a few deep breaths, then let go of my hand and pushed up on his elbows. Another look toward the door. He can't hear you. What do you see? You know how when you dream, stuff from your day comes back, only it's all mixed up? That's what it's like. I see things and sometimes I recognize them, but there, he searched for the words. In the wrong place. Out of context. That's it. Out of context. Like what? He hesitated, then shook his head. Nothing imp. Like what, Corey? Rave. He said the name quickly, as if getting it out before he could decide not to. I saw Rafe and I saw you. Only it's not any place I've seen you two together. Some place you don't recognize. No, it's your place. He waved at the window. You, me, Rafe, Daniel, and your dog out behind your house. It's like seeing a memory that never happened. Which is why I think it's my brain spitting out garbage. But if I tell Daniel, he'll worry it's a neurological problem. Neuro? Right. Brain. You could just say brain, you know. Neurological covers more than just the brain. He held up his hand. If there's one bonus to this disaster, it's not having to go to school for a while. Don't spoil that for me. Please. I smiled. He opened his mouth, then winced again. When he opened his eyes, he looked over my shoulder and let out a sigh of relief. Finally. Drugs. He put out his hand. Give him. They aren't there, Daniel said. We searched the medicine cabinet, the drawers, everywhere. There's a lot of stuff missing. I think your mom is planning to be gone a while. Probably didn't want to leave pills lying around, Sam said. No need to give anyone a reason to break in. Let's hope they didn't take the alcohol, too, I said as I stood. Corey shook his head. I think I'm okay. Another wave of agony doubled him over, retching. I'll grab a beer from Daniel began. No, I'm okay. Really? Just get dressed before you scare the girls. He waved at Daniel, bare-chested after taking off his soiled shirt. Help yourself to my closet. You wear a medium. I don't. That's just because I like my shirts fitting better. Tighter, I said. And, again, I don't, Daniel said. I'll wash this one. Corey made a face at him and waved him off. Once Daniel was gone, he collapsed, panting, as if he'd been holding back. If a drink will fix this, I began. No. You're refusing a drink. Sam said. From what I hear, that's a first. He flipped her off. Not good-humoredly either. She grumbled and hobbled from the room. There are more pills downstairs, Corey said. I have a stash. When I lifted my brows, he said, yeah, the headaches have been getting worse for a while. I didn't want my mom to know. That's how I found out booze helps. Only I'd rather not, so I've been hiding pills, saying they're gone so I can get more. That was dumb, I know. I should have told someone, which is why I'm telling you now. If they aren't there, can I grab you a beer? He glanced at the door, again looking for Daniel. Last resort, okay? Yeah, I know, I drink at parties. But that's different. Drinking to feel better is, he looked up at me. We've both seen what that does with Daniel's dad. Maybe it's a different kind of drinking to feel better, but I don't want to go there unless I have to. Okay, let me look for the pills. I found the medication. When I came back upstairs, Daniel was waiting. I motioned that I'd give the pills and water to Corey and come back. When I returned, he waved me into Corey's mom's bedroom. We need to talk about Corey, I said as I walked in and closed the door. I'm really worried about these headaches. I know. So am I. But there's something I need to tell you first. I was looking in here in case she had backup pills. The drawers are empty. Same as the closet. Same as the bathroom. They didn't just leave for a few days. Hey! Corey yelled. We hurried in to find him standing at his dresser. Where's my stuff? Your clothes. I said. No, they're here. I was trying to find a clean shirt for Daniel and noticed my stuff is gone. He waved at the empty dresser top. Trophies. Photos. My St. Christopher's medal. Mementos, I murmured. Corey was right, all his mementos were gone. So his mom must have decided she couldn't stay in Salmon Creek. When Serena died, her parents had left town. Too many memories. A check of Travis's room confirmed it. They'd taken their clothes, everything of value, and everything easily transported, leaving behind perishables and furniture. What about my clothes? Corey said. Those are hand-me-downs Travis wouldn't want, all things considered, I said. Your mom just took things that were important to you. Things to remember you by. But it's only been 3 days, Corey said. Mom isn't like that, she spent 4 months talking about buying a new sofa and another 2 shopping for it before deciding to stick with the one we had. Okay, I said. Well, maybe, I paused, hoping someone else would fill in the blank, but they just looked at me, expectant. We should look outside. Haley's place is right across the road and Brendan's house is around the corner. I think we can trust Haley's parents and Dr. Hajek. Brendan's mother was the local veterinarian, who'd helped me with countless injured animals. I trusted her. But who didn't I trust? Earlier, I'd been prepared to trust no one. But now that I was back in Salmon Creek, that changed. I thought of all the people I'd grown up with, the kids, their parents, the teachers, and doctors and shopkeepers. My gut trusted them all, which was crazy, because they all drew a paycheck from the St. Clouds. Even my parents. Not everyone could be innocent. Most probably weren't. So who could we trust? I stood there, frozen in doubt as Corey and Daniel watched me. Maybe not Dr. Hajek, I stammered. I mean, I know her, but maybe just the Morizes. Or we don't know who we can trust, Corey said. I think my mom's innocent. You're sure your parents are? Maybe we're both right. Maybe we're both wrong. But I do know if my mom was involved, she didn't do it to make money or get a nice house or anything like that. You said Rafe's mom joined the experiment because she thought she was doing something good for her kids. Fixing something. Giving them better lives. I'm going to bet that's what they all thought. Whatever they did, they're still on our side. These people chasing us? They're not. Bottom line. I hugged him. See, he said to Daniel over my shoulder. I told you chicks love it when you get mushy. I socked him in the arm. Okay. We venture out, then. Head over to the Morizes and hope someone's there. 27. I'd suggested taking a look out the front, then have one of us zip across the street. With only 4 houses in the court, there wasn't much chance of us being spotted. They elected the girl with the super hearing as scout. The others would stand watch and Daniel would whistle if they saw anyone. I stepped out the front door. The court was eerily quiet. I paused in the shadows of the porch and listened. The harsh jeer of Esteller's jay shattered the silence. Then I picked up the rat-a-tat-tat of a woodpecker. Otherwise, nothing. Just the wind whistling softly, branches creaking. I rubbed the back of my neck and made a face. So what if it was quiet? We didn't live in the city. Salmon Creek had just lost its mayor and 17s. It was a town in mourning. I looked across at Haley's house. The windows were dark. I scanned the other houses in the court. All the windows were dark. It was afternoon. The sun was shining. No need for lights. Something moved in the Morizes' second-story window. I jumped. Then I saw a flash of orange. Haley's cat had jumped onto the ledge. I let out a sigh of relief, then dashed across the road. I went in through the side garage door, which Corey said was always open. Ms. Morris's car was parked inside. I hurried to the house door and knocked. No one answered. I knocked again, then tried the knob. The door was locked. Not surprisingly, Corey also knew where they kept the key. I unlocked the door, slipped inside, and called, "Hello." Silence. "It's, Maya," I said. "Maya Delaney." Like they'd need a last name. No one answered. I walked down the hall. The house was as silent as the court outside. Dark and still. A sour smell permeated the hall, and when I peeked into the dining room, there was a glass of milk left on the table, beside a folded newspaper. I took another step and a squeak stopped me short. A mouse sat on the table, hunched over a partially eaten cookie. It squeaked at me again, then scampered away. I backed out of the dining room and hurried to the stairs. As soon as I got to the bottom, I smelled cat urine. I raced up the steps. The door to Haley's room was open. Her cat still perched on the windowsill, and he hissed and spat when he saw me. Fear and panic hit me like a fist to the gut. The cat's fear and panic. The room went dark. Then it flashed to life, and I was on the floor, racing from room to room, fear coursing through me, looking for someone, anyone. But every room was empty and all I could smell was smoke, drifting through the open windows. Smoke everywhere and my people gone. I surfaced from the cat's memories. He was still on the windowsill, hissing. "It's okay," I said. "Everything's okay." Before I could try to calm him, he sprang. I leaped out of the way. He tore off down the stairs. I got to the kitchen just in time to see a cat door swinging closed behind him. I ran to the door and yanked it open. An orange blur flew into the underbrush and was gone. I stood there, heart racing as I stared after the cat. I could still feel his terror. When it finally subsided, I stepped back inside, closed the door, and leaned against it. They were gone. The Morrises had evacuated and hadn't come back. Haley's cat must have been outside at the time and they couldn't find him. No one had been home since. Okay, so the families who had lost kids hadn't returned after the evacuation. I guess that made sense. It had only been 3 days. There would be funerals to plan. Funerals to plan. Oh God, my parents. Had they already held the service? Picked out a tombstone to mark an empty grave? I couldn't think about that. They'd know the truth soon enough. We just needed to speak to someone who had come back. I ran back to Corey's. They're gone, aren't they? Sam said as I came in. She was standing by the front window with Corey. Daniel had met me at the door and ushered me inside. I nodded. It doesn't look as if they've been back since the fire. I guess they're staying somewhere else for a while. I don't think it's for a while, Sam said. We just saw 2 moving trucks. The trucks one behind the other had driven along the street past the end of the court. Corey, Daniel, and I went out to check the other houses in the court. I looked in on Kenji first, but left her in the garage for now. We jogged over to the Morrises' house, then through the woods to another court behind it. The Hajek's house was there. All the windows were dark. We cut across the backyard to the deck and peered through the patio doors. As still and silent as the Morrises' house. There was no need for a key here, they'd left the patio doors unlocked. We stepped into the kitchen. A hush fell around us and we found ourselves creeping forward, as if one squeaky shoe might disturb resting spirits. That's what it felt like, too. Stepping into a mausoleum. Dust motes floated past. The stillness enveloped us as we walked into the living room. We stopped and stared. Every piece of furniture was gone, only bright, clean squares on the carpet where they'd been, like a blueprint for an unfinished room. We backed into the kitchen and went through to the dining room. Empty. Bare wires hung from the ceiling, where a chandelier had been. Okay, Corey whispered. I'm officially creeped out. Daniel and I didn't say a word. As if by mutual agreement, we all went outside and crossed to the next house. The Tafts were an older couple whose kids went off to college years ago. I only saw them at town parties, where they always brought homemade fudge. They gave out caramel apples for Halloween, and Serena and I used to sneak back for seconds, as if they wouldn't recognize us. They never said anything, though, just played along and gave us another. Sometimes two. The Tafts worked at the lab. Both of them. That meant they must have worked on the experiment. But I couldn't reconcile that with the nice couple who made fudge and gave out caramel apples. There was no car in the drive. No lights on in the house. That same hush seemed to seep from the very walls as we snuck up to the glass French doors. We peered into the living room. Empty. Corey was flying off the porch before we knew it. We went after him, and caught up as he stepped from the forest onto the north end of the road that turned into Main Street. Daniel grabbed his arm, but Corey shook him off, hissing, "There's no one here." "But there might be." Corey spun on him. "There's no one here. Don't you get it? No one is here." When Daniel tried to take his arm again, Corey shoved him, hard, and strode to the top of Main Street. We joined him and the three of us stood there, looking down the road. It was completely empty. Not a car, not a person, not even a bird perched on the wires. Not just empty. Desolate. The wind whistled down the street, making the awnings over the shops flap and groan. A paper whipped against my feet and I grabbed it. A spelling test from one of the primary students, big block printing and bright happy face stars. I looked at the name. Stacy. one of the grade 2 students. I'd coached her in track last year. Everyone's gone, Corey whispered. They just left. A sudden snarl made us jump. A dog tumbled out from between two buildings. Another leaped on it, snapping and snarling. Wild dogs. They'd always been in the woods, dogs gone feral, but Dad kept them out of the park and the town. More dangerous than a bear or a cougar, he said, because they weren't wary of humans. The dogs stopped fighting and plunged back into the alley. They came out again, growling. One had something in its mouth and the other was trying to snatch it away. Something with long white fur. There were no animals here with long white fur. No wild ones, that is. Oh God! I thought of the Moor's Pomeranian. Mary Grant's white Angora rabbit. Mrs. Tilson's Persian cat. I stared at the shapeless piece of white fur being pulled between the dogs. Daniel grabbed my shoulder and turned me around. A snarl, louder now, and I glanced over to see the dogs watching us. Two more came running from between the buildings. Corey whispered. Can we go now? Daniel said. Corey nodded and turned to run, but Daniel stopped him. Slowly, I said. Don't turn your back on them. Canines are all about dominance. You run, they'll chase. Back away slowly. Stay together. We did that. One of the dogs started toward us. Another took a tentative step. And if they attack anyway? Corey whispered. Then we run. The two dogs took a few more steps our way. Then the smallest one dove for the bundle of fur, snatched it up, and raced off. The other three tore after it. We breathed sighs of relief and hightailed it back to Corey's house. After we told Sam what we'd found, Daniel said, they're clearing out the town. That doesn't make sense, she said. Doesn't it? I said. The Nasts know about the experiment, so Salmon Creek isn't a secret anymore. Between the fire and the crash, the St. Clouds have an excuse for pulling up stakes. So now what? Corey said. No one's here. We have no idea where anyone went. We're just as screwed as we were this morning. I shook my head. We have food, water, and transportation. That's a lot more than we had this morning. All we need is a way to track down our parents. We might find that at my place we have shortwave radios. It was just the excuse I'd been waiting for. With every step we'd taken, I ached to go home, but there was still the risk of getting there, and I hadn't dared without a good reason. We might not need to go all that way, Sam said. If we can get to my place, my cell phone's there. You have a cell phone? Corey said. Every teen has a cell phone. Or so my aunt, and her voice caught Uncle thought. I told them I didn't have anyone to call, but I think they figured that would change if I had one. It's in my room. Daniel's hand went to the small of my back as he leaned down. We'll get the phone, then we're going to your place. I promise. I nodded. We got Kenji and headed out. 28. Again, we snuck in the rear. That's the advantage of living in a forest. Every yard in Salmon Creek backs up to it. The Tilson place was only half empty. The St. Clouds must have been working in stages, first taking what people wanted most, personal items, then coming back to remove the rest and clean up. The movers were still working on the upstairs, apparently. It really didn't look much different from what I remembered from visits with Nicole. I suppose that's because the only person whose personal belongings had to be taken was Mrs. Tilson. I thought about that. I guess I hadn't realized it before. Mrs. Tilson thought her entire family was gone. Her husband dead, only child killed in the same crash, along with the niece she'd been raising. "She took my stuff," Sam said. I turned. "My stuff's gone." "Well, yeah," Corey said. "She didn't expect you'd want it." "No, I mean." Sam shook her head and looked away, and I understood what she meant. Mrs. Tilson had removed mementos of Sam, just as she had her own daughters. I could see in Sam's face that it meant a lot. She found her phone hidden under her bed, turned off. "I'm going to call her." "Sorry, guys, you can go next." "Yes, you go first." I motioned the guys out. "I'll get washed up." The guys had already cleaned up, or done the best they could with a quick wash and teeth brushing at Corey's. There hadn't been any spare toothbrushes, so I'd done mine with my finger and tried not to look in the mirror. One glance had told me that no amount of touch UPS was going to help. I needed a 20-minute shower. "And this clothing is getting burned," I said as I raked a comb through my tangled hair. "There's a fireplace downstairs," Corey said. "I'll take it for you right now." I gave him a look. "Once I have something to wear." "Grab a shirt from Nick's room," Daniel said. "She won't mind." "It might be a little small but..." "That's fine," Corey said with a grin. "I won't mind either." It was good to see him grinning, even if there was a hint of desperation in his goofing around. We were all on the edge of panic, trying not to think about what happened in Salmon Creek, what happened to our parents, where we'd go from here. Still, there was no way I was wearing anything of Nicole's. I'd sooner put on Sam's stuff, even if black really wasn't my color. I was about to ask Sam if I could borrow something when she came out, phone in hand. Her expression said she hadn't talked to her aunt. "There's a signal, isn't there?" I said. "They can't block the whole town." "No, I've got a signal but..." She looked up. "Her cell number's been disconnected." I tried a few times. I took the phone and called my mother. Then my dad. Both times rang through to a message saying the number was no longer in service. I tried a third number plucked from memory, a guy I dated last summer, I think. Someone answered. I hung up. "The phone works," I said. "But my parents' numbers are disconnected, too." "Cutting off contact," Daniel said. I glanced at him. "Who pays for their cell service?" "This ain't Clouds, right?" I nodded. "They're on the corporate plan, like everyone." Everyone else in town was on the same plan, even if they didn't work for the St. Clouds directly. That was one of the benefits of Salmon Creek life. Free cell service for all. Cell service that could be discontinued or monitored at any time. "So why did they leave ours?" He stopped. Then he snatched the phone away from me. "We can't use that." "What?" "They didn't disable our phones. They must think we could still have them. If we do, and they dry out after the crash, we could use them and they could track us." I dropped the phone onto the bed. "We need to get out of here." Sam picked up the phone and turned it off. "We didn't talk to anyone. It'll be fine." Daniel hesitated, then said, "We have to get to Maya's place and check the shortwave radios." Sam's leg wasn't up to the walk. I'd suggested retrieving the truck and trying to zip into the park without being noticed. Daniel said it was too risky. He asked Corey to stay behind with Sam, but clearly Sam wasn't comfortable with that. I suggested Daniel stay. She refused. I didn't like leaving her behind, but that's what she wanted, and she wasn't budging. The moment I stepped into the park, my eyes filled with tears. It looked exactly as I'd left it. As we walked along the trail, other than the smell, there was no sign that there had been a fire. It had been veering south when we'd last seen it, but I'd barely dared hope that meant my park had been spared. I knew the animals in my rehabilitation shed were all safe. Mom had transported them to a facility in Victoria when the fire hit, but I was worried about every other creature out there, too. When we reached the house, I stopped. The Jeep was gone. The windows were dark. "They aren't here," I said, barely able to get the words past the lump in my throat. "Let's go in," Daniel said. "Make sure." The front door wasn't even locked. I stepped inside. The air was heavy and empty. Just empty. Even Kenji hung back, as if it was the home of strangers. She gingerly walked through and looked around, sniffing, then stood at the back door and whined. "I'll get her some food and water," Daniel said. Corey stayed with him. I went straight to my dad's office. His computer was gone. So were his shortwave radios. I headed upstairs. Nothing had been touched. My parents' clothing was still there. My stuff was still there. A few drawers were open, in the bedroom and the bathroom, from when Dad must have packed our evacuation bags. I stood in my parents' room, looking at their hastily made bed, an empty duffel bag taken from the closet, then dumped on the floor, rejected. There was something else on the bed. Picture frames. 3 empty ones. In an evacuation, we weren't supposed to take anything but an overnight bag. Most people would grab other stuff, though. A laptop. Jewelry. Whatever was important to them. My dad had taken their wedding photo and 2 baby pictures of me. My eyes burned again. I hurried into the bathroom and turned on the tap. The pipe spit and hissed. Nothing came out. "Hydro's off," Daniel said as he stepped into the open doorway. "For you guys, no electricity means no water." I found jugs under the sink for Kenji. "Do you want me to bring one up?" I shook my head. He moved closer. "We'll find them, Maya. It's just a matter of getting to your grandmother." "Only we can't do that, can we?" I said. "This ain't clouds and the Nasts will be prepared for that. I need to let her and my parents keep thinking I'm dead until I can." I took a deep breath. I don't even know how to finish that sentence. Everything was about getting back here and telling my parents. But they aren't here. I don't know where they are. I have no idea what to do next. I looked up at him. "Do you?" I have some thoughts." He cleared his throat. "We'll come up with a plan." I brushed past him and headed for the stairs. "Maya." I turned. He stood there, looking as lost and confused as I felt. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "You're right. We'll come up with something." I looked through my bedroom door and out the huge windows at the forest. "I need to go outside for a minute." "Just, for a minute." Corey was still in the kitchen when I got downstairs. I brushed past him. Kenji tried to follow as I slid out the back door. I closed it with a whispered apology. I ran into the forest. I planned to keep going, get in deep enough to relax and refocus and, yes, maybe feel sorry for myself for a few minutes before I faced the others again. As I was running, though, tears filled my eyes and I nearly flipped over a downed tree. I swiped at my eyes and I looked at the tree, and I remembered the last time I'd seen it. Remembered who'd sat on it. Rafe. Fresh tears. I tried to blink them back, but it was no use. I looked at this place, this tree, and I saw Rafe. Heard his laugh. Felt his kiss. Even smelled him. I closed my eyes and the feeling was so vivid I swore I could just reach out and... But I couldn't. I wouldn't ever again, and as I sat there crying, I didn't think about what I'd felt for him and what might have been. I thought about him. The person, not the guy in my life. I thought about everything he'd told me about his past, and I wished he'd told me more. I thought of what he'd said to me about his dreams for the future, what he wanted in life, and I realized how little of that I knew. He wanted to fix Annie. Beyond that, I had no idea. Was there a future he'd wanted? One he'd imagined? Or had he just concentrated on the present and getting through it? Only he hadn't gotten through it. He hadn't fixed Annie. He'd come to Salmon Creek to find me for answers, and I'd gotten him killed. No future. Not for Rafe. Just, gone. I looked down at the leather band on my wrist, his bracelet, and thought, I don't deserve this. I was ready to pull it off, climb a tree, and leave it there, in his memory. Then I stopped. I didn't deserve his bracelet, but maybe I still could earn it. Find Annie, if she was still alive. Help her. Finish what he started. I took a deep breath and touched the bracelet's cat's eye stone. I'm going to fix this. I know I can't, my breath caught, can't fix it all, but I'll do what I can. I promise. I squeezed my eyes shut and I sent out the promise again, fingers on the stone. I sensed him close by. Felt him, smelled him. I knew I'd find you here, a voice said behind me. Sooner or later. My heart stopped and I knew I was hearing wrong, that it must be Daniel, come to find me, but my mind was still fixed on Rafe, I whispered. I turned. He was walking out of the forest and he was grinning and there was no end because that was all I could think. My eyes shut. I didn't want them to. I didn't care if it was an illusion, I wanted to see him one more time before the vision disappeared and I was left with that last horrible memory of him falling from the helicopter. I know I'm looking a little rough, he said. But I didn't think it was that bad. His voice came closer. Open your eyes, Maya, he whispered. It's me. 20. I opened my eyes and when I did, he was right there, and all I could see was his eyes, those amazing amber eyes that I could fall into and... I stumbled back. You're not real. Actually, I am. Not a ghost. He brushed his hand over the tops of the tall grasses, making them sway. Not a zombie either, or I'd smell even worse by now. Not a ghost, not a zombie, just a freaking insanely lucky guy. I saw you fall. The fall isn't the problem. It's the sudden stop at the end. Avoid that end, he waved his hands down his body. Apparently, you can survive. That's not. You can't. Did I mention the insanely lucky part? Great thing about this island? Really big trees. Gotta love those redwoods, especially when they break your fall. Still, it was a hit and I've got the war wounds to show for it. He held out his bare arms, covered in healing scratches. There were more on his face. I looked at him then, my first good look, as hope started to flutter in my chest. Except for the scratches and a purpled bruise on his chin, he looked exactly as I remembered. Blue jeans, tank top, faded denim jacket, boots. Black hair curling over his collar. Brown eyes flecked with gold. Crooked smile threatening to burst into a grin. Got impaled, too. He lifted his shirt and turned around to show me what looked like a scabbed-over stab wound in his side. Dislocated my shoulder. Passed out from the pain. When I woke up, the shoulder was fixed, one of the benefits of being a shapeshifter I guess, and the rest was healing. I was unconscious for a while, apparently. I still can't believe it. Rafe shrugged. I'm guessing a regular person wouldn't have survived. But we're part cat, so maybe falls aren't so bad. I think I lost one of my 9 lives though. He twisted to look at the stab wound. Maybe 2. I threw my arms around his neck and kissed him, and when I did, I knew he was real. The heat of him, the smell of him, the feel of him, the taste of him, so incredibly real that it surpassed anything my memory could conjure up. He wrapped his arms around me and kissed me back, and it was like every other amazing kiss he'd given me, multiplied tenfold. I kissed him until I couldn't breathe, and then I kissed him a little more, until I had to pull back, gasping. I have got to die more often, he said. And he grinned, that incredible blaze of a grin that made me kiss him again. When we finally pulled apart, he brushed his palm over my still damp cheeks. Your parents are okay, Maya, he murmured. They've just left. The whole town left. I know. That's not. I stepped back, out of his arms, and looked over at the fallen tree. I came out here and I saw that, and I remembered us. You. He looked startled and, something else I couldn't quite put my finger on, but definitely startled, like he hadn't ever thought I'd be crying over him. I dreamed you were alive, I said. You were calling me and you needed help, and I wanted to go, but I swallowed. It didn't make sense. I told myself you couldn't be, so I didn't, and I'm sorry if you wouldn't have found me, Maya. If I called you, it was only in my dreams, when I was out cold. I never expected you to come after me. I should be dead. He tugged me into his arms. I'm just really, really glad I'm not. He kissed me, and it wasn't like the other ones, all fire and emotion. This one was achingly sweet, and when we separated, the look in his eyes was almost sad. I don't know where Annie is, I said. I'm sorry. Don't be. Another quick kiss, then he put his arm around my waist and started leading me back toward the house. We'll figure all that out later. Right now. The sliding back door to the house squealed. Daniel stepped onto the deck. Rafe and I were still in the woods, but we could see him, through the trees, and he could see us. He stopped dead. Kenji raced past him. She barreled down the steps toward us, and gave me a passing lick before jumping on Rafe. He pushed her down, laughing. See, I am real, he said. Still not sure, I said. Dogs are supposed to be able to see ghosts, you know. Maybe, but I'm sure that guy can't. As we stepped from the woods, he waved at Daniel, who'd come down to the bottom of the steps and was frozen again. Though he does look as if he's seeing one. He raised his voice so Daniel could hear. Yes, it's me. Not a ghost or a zombie or a long-lost twin brother. Rafe. Daniel started walking slowly across the yard. In the flesh. Battered and bruised flesh, but apparently it takes more than a fall from a helicopter to get rid of me. Wow. I can't believe it, but obviously, he looked Rafe up and down and shook his head. Wow. Now Corey stood on the back deck, staring. He came over and we had to go through the whole thing again. Yes, it was Rafe. Not a ghost. Not a zombie. Not a long-lost twin brother. As ludicrous as all those ideas sounded, though, they seemed more likely than the truth that a guy fell from a helicopter and survived. You sure about the twin thing? Corey said when Rafe had finished. Yes, I don't have a long-lost twin brother. I do, I said. Or so I've heard. Rafe grinned at me. Yes, but I'm not him. Which is good. Very good. He squeezed my hand. We'll be inside, Daniel said. Corey said. Romantic reunions are officially on hold, even for guys who've returned from the dead. We're neck deep in crap here and we need to dig our way out. Or at least come up with a plan. He looked from me to Daniel. Ideas? I have a couple, Daniel said. I just need time to think them through. Sure, Rafe said. While you do that, can I tell you mine? I've been here almost a day. Plenty of time to think as I waited for you guys to show up. We should head back to Sam, I said. She's at her place. Corey nodded. And I want to know how you not only survived the fall, but made it back here before us. Rafe seemed a little surprised at how quickly Daniel and Corey bought his miracle heal story, until I explained that they knew about the skinwalker thing. I told him briefly about Benandanti and our theories of Salmon Creek, so he wouldn't think I'd just randomly confessed to having supernatural powers. Then he gave his story. How did Rafe make it back so fast? Same way we did. He stole a ride. A motorcycle. In his case, though, he skipped all the steps between. No tortuous trek through the woods, he'd landed relatively close to a town. No attempts to get help, because Rafe wasn't like us. His life experience was closer to Sam's. His mom had sheltered him as best she could from the ugliness of life on the run, but he hadn't grown up in a world where you could stroll into town, ask strangers for help, and expect to get it. Annie used to have a motorcycle, he said, and she'd taught him to ride it. He also knew how to hotwire one. I wasn't asking how. Like I said, his life experience wasn't ours. And you knew we were alive? I said as we approached the outskirts of town. I knew you were alive. That made me feel. I don't know. There was a flutter of happiness at the thought, but some guilt, too, because I'd had the same experience. I'd known that he was alive. Yet I hadn't trusted it. Are you going to even ask who else survived? Corey said. Did I imagine the touch of sarcasm in his voice? Well, obviously you guys and Samantha, Rafe said. I'm guessing, he shrugged. I'm guessing, no one else made it. Not exactly the subject anyone wants me discussing, I'm sure. Haley and Nicole were kidnapped, I said. I told him the story as we cut over to the Tilson house. So you'll want to try to get them back, Rafe said as we crossed the back lawn. Yeah, Corey said. Sorry to throw a wrench in this supposed plan of yours. Rafe sighed. Look, Corey, I know you don't like me. Daniel doesn't either, but he's being nice about it for Maya's sake. I'm not, Daniel protested. It's okay. I didn't go out of my way to make friends in Salmon Creek. I know that. I acted like an ass, and as Maya may have told you, I had a reason, one that probably still makes me an ass. I'm glad to hear Haley's okay. Of everyone in Salmon Creek, I treated her the worst, so I'm hoping I get the chance to apologize. I'm glad Samantha is okay, even if we don't get along. As for Nicole, I know her about as well as I know you and Daniel. Which is about one step up from not at all. Of course, I'm glad you're okay. I know you'll want to get your friends back. I'm absolutely fine with that. But if you expect me to be as worried about them as you are, that's not going to happen. No one expects you to care about Nick and Haley as much as we do, Daniel said. But I am glad to see you're okay. For Maya's sake. I know. He waved off Daniel's denials. I don't expect more. And, chances are, I'll turn out to be an ass after all. He said it jokingly, but he broke eye contact, and didn't look my way either, just nudged me toward the house. I wondered if it did kind of hurt him, getting a cool reception from the guys. That reception didn't improve once we got in the house. Rafe was happy to see Sam was okay. Whether you like a person or not, you don't wish them a horrible death. Sam, though. Well, I'd spent long enough with her now to realize she was lacking certain filters most of us have. So, I guess you'll be moving on, then, she said. Got things to do? Places to be. Daniel winced. Corey lifted his brows. Rafe only sputtered a laugh. Well, at least you didn't say you're sorry to see me alive, he said. You know what I mean, Sam said. No, I said. We don't. Rafe just survived a fall from a helicopter and trekked back here to meet us. Meet you, Sam said. And what I meant was that he'll be leaving to look for his sister. Right. I am looking for Annie, Rafe said. But I can do that with you guys, especially if she's been captured by the same people who have Nicole and Haley. Maya tells me you have a cell phone. It probably wasn't a good idea to use it, but since no one swooped down while you were waiting here. Which is why I insisted on waiting here. Sam lifted her chin. If the Nasts were tracking the phone, they'd have come here and found me alone. But no one showed up. Now, Maya, if you can stop gaping at Rafe for a few minutes, we really should come up with a plan. I glared at her. I spent 3 days thinking I'd watched him fall to his death. Leave her alone, Sam, Daniel murmured. This isn't the time. I'm just saying it's not the time for that either. We need to focus, and having Maya moon over Rafe is making everyone uncomfortable. Rafe grinned. Doesn't bother me. Because your ego really needs the encouragement. Rafe's grin hardened. You don't know anything about me or my ego, Samantha. I'm going to ask you to give the attitude a rest for a while. Maya tells me you and Daniel are Benandanti, and I remember my mom mentioning them. You guys have a sixth sense for evil. Clearly, I'm not triggering Daniel's radar or he wouldn't let me in the same room as Maya. Am I tripping yours? Her mouth opened and I could tell she wanted to say he was, but she closed it again, so hard her teeth clicked. After a moment, she said, You think you're better than everyone else. You think the rules don't apply to you. You breeze into town, working your charm on all the girls, then walk away when you realize they aren't the skinwalker you're looking for. You find her, Sam pointed at me, and you use her, too, but apparently, she's forgiven you. Maya's smart and she's sensible, so maybe I'm trying to figure out why she's with you when there are great guys like, she stumbled, as if searching for a name. Like Brendan. You've got some kind of hold over her, and I don't like it. Rafe leaned over and whispered. It's a love spell I picked up from a witch over in Nanaimo. But don't tell Maya. You think you're funny? No, I think you have your own issue with me and I think I know what it is. But it has nothing to do with me personally, so I'm going to try not to take it personally. And, while I might be enjoying this, he lifted his hand, which was still clasping mine. I know it's as temporary as a love spell. Give it a few hours and she'll hate me again. Hate's a strong word, I said. Strong emotion is better than indifference. He grinned at me, then looked at the others. Now, if we can stop bickering for a few minutes, I'll tell you my plan. His gaze moved to Sam. Which I'm sure Maya and Daniel will change, if they don't outright reject it, and I'm fine with that. What did you have in mind? Daniel said. Thrty. Rafe's plan was simple: get us to the mainland. His mom had given him the names of some people there. Supernaturals who had worked on the experiment and then left it. One was a woman in Vancouver. Rafe hadn't made contact with any of them earlier because his mother had told him to reach out to them only as a last resort. This was, Rafe figured, a last resort. Sam wanted to leave right away. Rafe thought we should get a good night's rest. Daniel agreed, and Corey seconded Daniel. As the three of us long-time residents pointed out, getting off the island at night wasn't easy. Next, the guys were heading out to find a house we could hole up in some place the cabals wouldn't expect to find us. Sam's leg wasn't up to scouting, and Rafe thought I should stay with her, take a break, get a hot shower, and put on the fresh clothes I'd brought from home. That may have been his nice way of saying I really needed that shower. As the guys headed downstairs, I called Daniel back. Rafe hesitated even when I waved him on, but after a moment, he went with Corey. I led Daniel to the master bedroom and closed the door behind us. "What's up?" I whispered. You've barely said a word since Rafe showed up. You don't trust him." "What? No. Of course I trust him. The guy fell out of a helicopter so we wouldn't." "Is it his story?" "No. It's a miracle he survived, but like you said, he's part cat. They always land on their feet." He smiled, but it was strained. "Then you don't buy the part about how he got back here?" "I do. He said he left the motorcycle behind the blender." "Easy enough to check. If he was lying, he'd say he ditched it in the woods somewhere." "Uh-huh. You've thought this through, I see." Daniel put his hands on my upper arms and leaned down to look me in the eye. Well, except the fact that our town is empty, and we have no idea where anyone is or how to find them." I dropped my gaze. "Right. Sorry. You're quiet because you have other things on your mind." "I'm worried, too. I know it doesn't seem like it, because Rafe's back and obviously I'm happy about that, so maybe I'm not as focused as I should be. I'll snap out of it." He gave me a quick hug. "Don't. Something in this whole mess has gone right for you. You're allowed to be happy." He met my gaze. "Okay." I nodded. "Go have a shower and try to relax," he said. "You're going to need your energy, and I'm going to need my co-captain." I was in the Tilson's bathroom, still dressed, starting the shower, when I heard a faint click, and I wheeled to see Rafe coming in, holding a card he'd used to pop the lock. His free hand covered his eyes. "Excuse," I began. "Oh, sorry. Didn't know you were in here," he said, his hand still over his eyes as he frantically motioned, apparently trying to stop me from stating the obvious that he'd broken in and knew full well I was here. I pulled his hand from his eyes, and mouthed, "What?" "Play along," he mouthed back. "Please." There was no teasing glimmer in his eyes. They pleaded with me so desperately that I felt a chill in my gut. I went to turn off the water. He grabbed my arm and shook his head. Then he moved me closer to the shower, leaned in and whispered, "Ask me to join you." "What?" He clapped a hand over my mouth and whispered, "Trust me. Please." I remembered Sam saying she'd stayed behind to make sure her phone call didn't bring someone running. What if it had? What if they'd come while we were gone and cut a deal with her? Or snuck in and planted bugs, and were just waiting for the right time to nab us? I cleared my throat. "Better not stick around or I might ask you to join me." Rafe chuckled. "If I thought you were serious, I'd take you up on that. I was just coming in to do a better job washing up." There wasn't any water at your place and my cuts and scrapes are filthy. Guess it'll have to wait. He waved for me to continue. When I arched my brows, he motioned to us, then to the shower. He wanted us in the shower, where no one could hear our conversation. Which was a little extreme. And extremely awkward. He'd given me a lead-in, though, so I used it. No, you really should get them cleaned, I said. And I should take a look at them. I suppose we can accomplish both if you keep your shorts on, and keep your hands to yourself. He grinned. Fine by me. I turned my back and took off my jeans and socks. When I'd finished, he was climbing into the shower. While the view was very nice, my gaze went to his shoulder, to the paw print birthmark there, a mirror image of the one on my hip. I hadn't told him about my first shift to cat form. Now, suddenly, I wanted to. Really wanted to. I wanted to share that with him, see his reaction, tease him about beating him to it and hear his laugh. He turned and waved me into the shower with him. He backed up to give me room, but it was a shower stall, not much room to be had. The hot water beat down, soaking through my shirt. I leaned back into it, forgetting Rafe as I luxuriated in the feeling of hot, clean water. When I opened my eyes, he was watching me. Really watching me. I looked at the water pounding off his lean chest, trickling down to his soaked boxers, and I wasn't thinking it'd be nice to lean over and give him a chaste kiss. Really wasn't. I was sure this would be a scene I'd lock away to replay when I was alone, but for now, I couldn't cross that space between us. He'd brought me here to tell me something, and even if he hadn't, I wouldn't cross it, because that would lead to places I wasn't ready to go. You don't make out half naked in a shower with a guy if you aren't planning on going somewhere with it. Actually, you shouldn't be half naked in a shower with a guy if you aren't planning on going somewhere with it. But under the current circumstances, normal rules didn't apply. I eased forward and leaned up to his ear. Is this what you wanted? He chuckled. I'd better not answer that. His gaze traveled down me, then zipped back to my face. Sorry. Focus, Rafe. I am just on the wrong thing. He leaned in to kiss me, but pulled back sharply, his face twisted in a look of pain, like he'd just been jabbed in the back. Are you okay? No. Not really. His look then was so wistful I felt that chill again. Then he leaned down to my ear and whispered. It's a trap. Sam. I whispered. You think they came while we were? No. Not Sam. Then. I looked up into his face and saw the pain there, his eyes dark. Then I looked out the shower door at his clothing, dropped in the far corner of the bathroom. If he'd just wanted to talk to me in private, he could have gotten me aside easily. Just let me come with them to look at houses. Talk to me in one of them. Or in the forest. But he'd been the one who'd wanted me to stay behind. Who'd suggested I take a shower. I looked at his clothes again and whispered. He didn't reply, but I saw the answer in his eyes. I backed toward the door. He caught me and slapped his hand over my mouth, then leaned down to my ear. Water trickled from his hair onto my shoulder. I won't let them take you, Maya, he whispered. I swear I won't. I'd never do that. He pulled me back under the spray and spoke against my ear. They grabbed me when I got to town. It's this St. Cloud's. They have any. Either I help them or they won't help her. I had to, Maya. His eyes pleaded with me to believe him. I did. Annie meant everything to him. If they had her, he'd go along with any plan to save her. But that didn't mean I didn't feel like I'd been betrayed. By someone I'd finally trusted. I know this means it's over, he whispered. I got a second chance, and I blew it, and he swallowed and turned his head, his expression hidden behind the curtain of water. I'd give anything not to do that. I would, Maya. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. When I pushed past the pain of betrayal, I did believe him. Because he'd let go of my hand as we dangled from that helicopter. Because he'd been ready to die to save me. And because even if he wasn't looking me in the face, I could hear the pain in his voice. It's going to be okay, he said. I wouldn't let anything happen to you. I have a plan and you'll be safe. And the others? Them, too. He looked at me again, still close enough to whisper through the pounding water, close enough for me to feel the heat of his breath. I know that's just as important to you, and I swear everyone will be okay. For now, though, you need to go along with the plan. It's the only way we'll get out of this place. And you can't tell the others. What? He gripped my arms and pulled me even closer, gaze locked on mine. They need to act like everything's okay, so you can't tell them. Not even Daniel. I backed up, freeing myself. That's the deal breaker, isn't it? He murmured. Daniel. I trust. I know you do. But I don't, and not because I think he's untrustworthy, but because I don't know him well enough to be sure he won't screw up. The only person I trust is you. Then trust me when I say you can trust him. But that was asking too much, because if the situation was reversed, I'd say it was unfair. I trusted him. But would I put my family's life at risk if he gave his word that someone else could also be trusted? No. If things go wrong, I have to tell him, I said. If he's in danger, I have to warn him. Rafe hesitated, then nodded. There's no woman in Vancouver, is there? I said as I pushed back my wet hair. The water was cooling now. No contacts your mom gave you? No, that's a story they fed me. But we're going to follow it, because getting you guys to Vancouver is the best chance you have. You guys. Not us. Best chance you have. Not we. When we get to Vancouver, you'll pretend to suddenly realize it's a trap, he said. You'll turn on me and you'll run, and leave me behind. But they'll catch me. I know. It's the only way. They'll think I did my best, so Annie will be safe. I wish he looked away, then leaned toward my ear again so I couldn't see his face. There's no other way. Annie needs me. And you don't. Not like that. You can look after yourself and, he straightened and gave me a crooked smile. By then you'll be happy to be rid of me, I'm sure. I leaned forward and whispered, no, I won't. Then I kissed him. Just a kiss, my hands still at my sides. When I pulled back, he looked stunned. Then he rubbed his mouth and said, I know that just means you understand. At least, I hope you do. I do. I understand that you had an impossible choice to make. I understand that I couldn't be that choice. It had to be both of us, Annie and me, safe, and what you wanted didn't matter. Just like when you let go of my hands in the helicopter. I said the same words he'd said to me before he'd let go. It's okay. A twisted smile. No, not really. But it'll be okay soon. Or as close as it can get. THRTY1. Rafe left then. Got out, dried off, dressed, and slipped away before anyone caught him. I washed in the now cool water. Or I think I did. I couldn't remember doing it, though the walls were flecked with suds when I got out. I'd forgiven Rafe for what he'd done. I suppose that surprised me a little. But he really didn't have a choice. I couldn't hold that against him. Back when he'd told me why he'd come to Salmon Creek, I hadn't forgiven him nearly as quickly. There had to be a better way to find the other skinwalker, I reasoned, one that didn't hurt the feelings of every girl in town. But a lot had changed since then. A lot had changed in me, and even if I still thought I'd have found another way, I understood that he'd done his best, that he regretted any hurt he'd caused. This time, I wasn't even sure there was another way. That didn't mean I was okay with it. Okay with his decision, yes, as painful as it was. What I wasn't okay with was the overall situation. We were sitting in a trap. The St. Clouds and maybe even the Nests by now were out there, watching us and listening. And there wasn't a thing I could do about it because Rafe was right, we needed to get to Vancouver, where we could lose ourselves in a metropolis. Until then, we had to act like nothing was wrong. No, I had to act like nothing was wrong. The others couldn't know. But Daniel wasn't just the others. Not telling him felt like a betrayal. It was a betrayal. I'd told Rafe that I wouldn't, but the more I thought about it, the less certain I was I could keep that promise. We gathered food and supplies from the other houses. As for money, I'd cleared out the emergency stash my parents had forgotten, and even if I knew they'd want me to have it, it still kind of felt like stealing. The others did the same, taking money from any place they knew their parents hid it. We all had bank cards, all except Rafe. We agreed to take out the maximum just before we got on the ferry. Would our accounts be blocked? We didn't know. If not, would the banks alert our families? Would our parents think some ghoul had taken the cards from the crash wreckage? Or would they realize how unlikely that would be, not only finding our cards but our pins, and would that make them consider the possibility we were still alive? I hoped so. God, I hoped so. We decided to stay at Principal Barnes's house. He had a 10-year-old son and a daughter in the grade below us, so there were 3 bedrooms, plus a sofa bed. Daniel wanted the sofa bed, so he could sleep on the main level, in case anyone broke in. I'd get Kenji to stay with him, as backup. Sam and I took the kids' rooms. Both had just single beds, and I'd suggested Sam and I could share the master room instead, but Rafe said no. Give that to Corey and he'd use the futon in the covered back patio and guard the back door. Did he need to sneak out and report in? Maybe. We'd barely spoken since the shower. Or, I guess, I'd barely spoken to him. I couldn't stop thinking about his clothes. I was heading to bed when Daniel appeared. Is everything okay? He whispered when we were inside my room with the door closed. Sure. His look called me a liar. You and Rafe. Something's up. I hesitated, and the urge to tell him everything was so strong, I had to clamp my jaw shut. No, I said quickly. Everything's fine. It's a little much right now. I thought he was dead, and he isn't, and I'm feeling a lot of things. Which was the truth. Okay. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a problem. There is. There's a huge problem. And I should tell you. If anything goes wrong and you get hurt, I'll never forgive myself. No problem, I said. I'm just confused and exhausted and worried about my parents, and really hoping we'll get somewhere tomorrow. We will. I lay in bed and stared at the wall. Rafe had put me in an impossible position. If I didn't tell Daniel, what did that make me? The kind of girl who fell head over heels for a guy and forgot her friends? Who'd put her new boyfriend ahead of those who'd been in her life for years? Where did my loyalty lie? Part of me wanted to say with Rafe. He'd been willing to die for me. Now he was giving up his freedom for me. But where did my loyalty really lie? There was no question. With the guy who'd been by my side since I was 5. Who'd watched my back since I was 5. Who'd suffered with me through Serena's death and Rafe's supposed death and everything else. The guy whose own loyalty I never questioned. I had to tell Daniel. I waited until everyone was asleep, then crept downstairs. Through the living room doorway, I could see Daniel on the sofa bed, Kenji lying across his feet. She lifted her head, but I put out my hand, telling her to stay, and she lowered it again. I walked to the covered porch. Rafe was on the futon, still dressed, no blankets or pillow, sleeping with his head on his arm. It was chilly, with the cold night air seeming to blast through the window glass. I found a blanket folded by the wood-burning stove. I went back to Rafe, unfolded the blanket, and crawled in beside him. He woke as I was pulling the blanket up over us. Maya. I put my fingers to my lips and lay down. When I opened my mouth, he put his hand over it and waved at himself, reminding me that he was still wired. Then he leaned to my ear again, his voice so low I'd never have heard it without Skinwalker hearing. I have to sleep with my clothes on. But I know why you're here. Daniel. He covered my mouth again and whispered in my ear. You need to tell him. I was hoping you wouldn't. He trailed off, but stayed by my ear, so I couldn't see his expression. I knew what I'd see if I did, though. Disappointment. Hurt. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He hugged me. A tight hug. Fierce. Then his lips went to my ear again. Don't be. I tried to look away, but he caught my chin and kissed me, and it was such a sweet kiss, and I felt so guilty, like I'd betrayed him, and my throat seized up and tears trickled down my cheeks, onto his. He pulled back and looked surprised, then wiped the tears away with his thumbs, holding my face in his hand. It's all good, Maya, he whispered. I mean that. I see how you and Daniel are, and I want you to trust me that much, but I know I have to earn it, and I've done a crappy job so far. Still, you trusted me enough to tell me first. That's a start. A big start. He bent down and his kiss was so full of longing that tears pricked my eyes again. When another one rolled down my cheek, he wiped it away. No more of that, he said. I'm just. I know. His lips moved to my ear. So am I. I put my arms around his neck and hugged him, face buried in his neck, and he hugged me back, making no move to kiss me again, just holding me. Then he put his lips against my ear and whispered, I'll find a way to get back to you, Maya. I promise. I knew he couldn't promise, neither of us could promise, but in that moment, I let myself believe it, and I curled up against him, closed my eyes, and fell into the first deep and dreamless sleep I'd had in a week. Rafe woke me in the morning. Sorry, he whispered. But I can hear Kenji moving around, and if Daniel comes in and finds you here, it won't matter that we're both fully dressed. I'll get my ass kicked. I shook my head. He wouldn't. What I do with you is my business. Still pretty sure there'd be ass kicking if he found you in my bed. I snuck out. Time to talk to Daniel. Except he wasn't on the couch. I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty spot. Hey, you're up, Daniel said behind me. I turned to see him in the kitchen doorway, a box of cereal in his hand. No milk, but they do have Fruit Loops. I know you love Fruit Loops. Thanks. I took a step toward him. But first I need to. Corey came bounding down the stairs. Did I hear the breakfast bell? Food's all gone, Sam called from the kitchen. Daniel backed up, disappearing from view. I hesitated. What's up? Corey said. Nothing. Just, the Fruit Loops are mine. Not if I get them first. After breakfast, Rafe distracted the others while I led Daniel into the garage. It's about Rafe, isn't it? He said as we settled on the garage steps. I nodded. I have to talk to you and you're not going to like it. He exhaled. Yeah, I already know what it's about. You do. I'm being a jerk to him. He tried to talk to me about wrestling at breakfast, and I blew him off. We all keep complaining that we don't know him, but when he tries to get to know us, we shut him down. I'm sorry. That's not. I have nothing against the guy. I don't know why I keep. He rolled his shoulders and rubbed the back of one as he made a face. Bad sleep. Yeah. But we're all stressed and worried and tired, and that's no excuse for being a jerk to Rafe. I stretched my legs, then took a deep breath and said, actually, I might know what's setting you off with Rafe. That's what I wanted to talk about. He didn't answer, and when I glanced over, he looked shocked. Shocked and, something else. Before I could get a better look, he turned away. I don't have a problem with Rafe, Maya. Well, I do, Sam said as she opened the door. Daniel clambered to his feet. You do have a problem with Rafe, Daniel, Sam said. We all do. This is a private discussion, Daniel said. Not if it's about Raphael. Everyone's pussyfooting around and I'm tired of it. She followed our gaze and turned to see Rafe standing behind her, arms crossed. What? She said. You don't think I'd say this to your face? I will. You're a self-centered jerk, Rafe Martinez. You've got everyone convinced that you sacrificed yourself for Maya and Daniel, but that's crap. You didn't let go. You slipped. Maya wanted to believe there was more to it, so she convinced Daniel. She didn't convince me of anything, Daniel said, his voice low. I was there, too, Sam. He let go. So? He's not actually dead, is he? Rafe sputtered a laugh. She glowered at him, then at Corey, who joined them, grinning as he heard. Even Daniel had to wipe away a smile. What? She said. He isn't. Fact that he survived his heroic sacrifice really shouldn't be held against him, Daniel said. Look, I'm fine with Rafe. No, you're not. Heroic sacrifice or not, he's still a jerk. He waltzed into Salmon Creek and stole Maya. Stole. I said. It's not your fault. You two are both skinwalkers. It's animal magnetism. You can't help yourself. She glared at Corey, who was cracking up behind Rafe. Stop that. You know it's true. Maya's too smart to fall for an arrogant, self-centered. Enough, Daniel said. Sam sighed. I know you're trying to be fair, Daniel, but you need to stand up for yourself, not let this smirking bad boy wannabe waltz in end. Enough. Daniel's roar made everyone stumble back. He climbed the steps and stopped in front of Sam. I don't know what your problem is, Sam, but you've now insulted everyone here except Corey. Oh, she already zinged me, Corey said. I started rubbing my temples and she suggested I don't really get headaches. It just hurts me to think. It was a joke, Sam said, flinching under Daniel's scowl. Inside, he said. Everyone. We need to leave. Now. But I began. Only Rafe heard me. He tapped Daniel as he passed. I think Maya still needs to talk to you. Daniel turned. I do, I said. It'll only take a minute. We'll talk on the way, he said. We really need to get going, and if Corey's getting a headache. It's not bad, Corey interjected. I'll be. You won't be fine. We need to look after that first. Now, everyone, grab your stuff and let's go. After they'd gone by, Rafe came back to me, still standing on the garage steps. When we reach the highway, say you need a pit stop, he whispered, lips at my ear. I'll distract the others and you can take him aside. Thanks. I know you'd rather I didn't tell. I've gotten used to the idea. And you want to tell him, which is more important. Corey shouted, come on, you two, and I hurried in to make sure he took his pills before we left. THRTY2. We took the truck. Corey's mom's SUV would have been more comfortable, but also extremely recognizable with the police logo. Not that it mattered, since we were already being tracked, but I could hardly say that. Daniel drove. I rode shotgun. I'd tried to get Sam to take that spot, so her leg would be more comfortable. She'd refused. We opened the window into the topper, though, so we could talk, and left the curtains open. We took the worst of the back roads. Again, that wasn't necessary. Again, I couldn't say so. Daniel was driving along an empty dirt road when a service truck pulled out in front of us. He eased off the gas. It's okay, I said. It looks legit. So did the fire and rescue. The truck swerved suddenly, swinging around until it blocked the road. Reverse! Corey yelled. Daniel had already put the truck into reverse and it was spinning backward. Then he hit the brakes hard enough to send everyone flying. I looked in the side mirror to see two vans blocking the road behind us. They've boxed us in, I said. Rafe was on his knees, peering out the rear window on the topper. When he turned, I could see genuine shock in his eyes. They didn't trust you, I murmured. What? Daniel said. Nothing, just is that a lane? There. Go down there. He did, but as he turned into the lane, I realized it was a driveway. Doesn't matter, Daniel said, hitting the gas. I'll get us as far as I can. As he rocketed along the lane, I scanned the surrounding forest for any opening big enough to drive through. There wasn't one. Just narrow tracks, ending at a cottage, trees hemming in all sides. We're going to have to run, Daniel said. Everyone out. Into the woods. Split up. As we scrambled out, I yelled, Sam. She can't run. Daniel swore and raced around to the rear. Corey and Rafe were helping Sam down. Go, she said. Corey and I can carry you, Daniel said. Just grab on. Then 3 of us will get caught instead of 1. Go. She pushed Daniel. When he hesitated, she shoved him hard enough to knock him off his feet. You know it's the right thing, she said as he scrambled up. They won't hurt me. Without you, I'm the only Benandanti they have. We didn't know that, of course. But she was right that we'd never escape carrying her. We'll come back for you, Daniel said. After you have backup, please. No offense, but you guys aren't up to fighting these people. Daniel nodded. But we will come back. I know. She hugged him. It was an awkward, one-armed embrace that caught him off guard. She pushed him away before he could say anything. Then she turned to me. "Look after him. Don't let him do anything stupid." "I will." When I looked for Rafe, he wasn't there. Then I saw him jogging back from the woods. Daniel gave us a look, but I couldn't explain then. We ran into the forest just as the service truck was on us. Kenji brought up the rear, hurting us. When a man shouted, she wheeled and snarled. Then she charged. "Kenji, no!" The shot hit her square in the chest and she reared up, toppling over backward and hitting the ground, and if Daniel and Rafe hadn't both been holding me back, nothing would have stopped me from going to her. But they held me and all I could do was fight and scream at them to let me go, until Daniel said, "It's a dart, Maya." He pointed at her, struggling to rise. "Just a tranquilizer dart." That stopped my heart from pounding, but it didn't mean I wanted to abandon her. They had to drag me away, Corey helping, until I heard someone say, "Load the dog in the back with the girl," and I knew there was nothing I could do. So I ran, stumbling at first, still seeing Kenji lying in the dirt, struggling to rise. Daniel kept me upright and kept me moving. "They aren't following us," Corey said. "Why aren't they following us?" "They know it won't be hard to find 4 kids tearing through the woods," Rafe said. "Daniel's right. We need to split up. Better than that, we need a target. One person to make more noise than all the others put together. That'd be me." A wry smile my way. "I'm good at causing trouble." "It'll work better if there are 2 targets," Corey said. "Rafe and I go separate ways. We make noise. You 2 keep going. We hope that splitting their attention means no one gets caught." "I'll do it," Daniel said. Corey thumped him on the back. "I know you would, but you and Maya are our best chances of getting help. Don't worry, I don't plan to get captured. We'll meet you guys at the ferry," I said. "They won't expect us to follow the same plan." "But how would they know what we had planned?" Corey said. "They must have planted bugs," I said quickly. "Maybe in the house or in the truck. We'll meet at the ferry. They won't expect that." Before they left, I took Rafe aside. "Will you be coming back?" I whispered. "They double-crossed me. I don't know what that means for Annie." His eyes darkened, but he shook it off. "I can't trust them. Better I come with you, and try to rescue her." "Good. I mean. I know what you mean." He turned to leave, then came back with a folded note. He shoved it in my pocket. "Just something I was going to give you before I left." He jogged away. Then Daniel and I took off. We moved as quickly as we could, making the least amount of noise possible. "They know everything," I said finally. "This ain't clouds. They had Rafe. He told you." I glanced back, but his face was expressionless. Intentionally expressionless. "This ain't clouds caught him coming into Salmon Creek," I said. "They have Annie. They used her to get him to trap us. But that's not what happened here. He was supposed to get us to Vancouver so they could grab us there. Once we arrived, I was going to turn on him, say I knew he was working with them. We'd take off. They'd think he'd done the best he could. That was the plan." I looked back again. Daniel's face still wasn't giving anything away, but he nodded, as if he understood. "Obviously they figured out what he was doing," I said. "Or they fed him a false plan, so they could make sure he didn't double-cross them." I stopped and turned around. "I'm sorry, Daniel." I tried to tell you. He paused, then swore. Back at the house. I should have tried harder. I'm sorry. You did try hard. I was too distracted to listen. It wouldn't have changed anything anyway. We have to keep going. He turned me to the west. We'll head toward that ridge. Find a place to hole up. As we raced toward the ridge, I heard a cry. Then a shout. Rafe? Corey? There was no way of knowing. When a second shout rang out, I told myself they hadn't both been captured, but I wasn't sure I believed that. Daniel and I kept running. We could see the ridge now. Safety. Just get. Something whizzed past me. Dan. I whirled, shouting a warning, only to see him stagger backward, a dart embedded in his shoulder. Another zinged past my arm. Daniel yanked me to the ground. We crawled into thick bushes. I tugged the dart from his shoulder. He blinked hard, eyes unfocused. He shook his head to clear it. I'm fine, he said. Just a little woozy. Must not have gone in deep enough. I scanned the ridge, and I caught a flicker of light reflecting off metal. Sharpshooter, I whispered. But you can't do that with tranq darts. These people can resurrect extinct supernatural races, Maya, Daniel whispered. I think their technology goes a little beyond the norm. Right. Okay. I took a deep breath. Follow me. I started crawling through the brush. I'd gone only a few steps when I realized Daniel wasn't behind me. I turned to see him on his stomach, blinking hard. Nope, he said. It went in deep enough. I scrambled back to him. Go on, Maya, he said. No. Ignoring his arguments, I tried to lift him, arm over my shoulders. When that failed, I tried dragging him from the bushes, pleading with him to help me, to just get himself a little ways away from where he'd fallen, please just a little ways. But he was almost unconscious, fighting just to keep his head up. Go on, Maya, he said, words slurring. Remember what we said. Only one has to get away. Then it'll have to be Rafe or Corey. I'm not leaving. They got Rafe and Corey. You know they did. Go. I shook my head. I won't. One of us has to get away. He managed to look up at me, his eyes so unfocused I knew he couldn't see anything. Please, Maya. Go. He dropped then, a dead weight, falling on his side. I could hear a team coming. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'll make it up to you. I bent and kissed Daniel's cheek. Then I left. THRTY3. Only I didn't leave. Not the way he wanted. I couldn't. I hunkered down nearby as two strangers retrieved Daniel. They said nothing, just loaded him onto a stretcher and carried him away. Two others continued the hunt for me. I waited until they had passed, then hurried after the stretcher. They took Daniel back to the cabin. I prayed this meant they'd set up camp there, so that would be where they'd hold the captives. Of course that would be too easy. I arrived to see them loading Daniel into the back of the van. They were talking to someone inside. Find the Delaney girl, a man said. I recognized the voice that answered. Dr. Inglis, head of the laboratory in Salmon Creek. Once Maya's in the forest, she's gone, she said. She's as at home there as any wild animal. Our only hope was to catch her with one of the others. She sighed. We'll give it a few minutes. Then we're pulling out. The helicopter is waiting back in town. I'd like to get these kids on it before they wake up. That gun doesn't carry a big enough dose to keep these guys out long, and Bryant took the rest. I peered out at the setup. Just the one van. Had they already taken Sam and Kenji? I had to make sure that van didn't leave. Give Daniel time to wake up. If I could put a hole in one of the tires, maybe two, that would stop them. I just needed. My arms ached. I rubbed one absently, and felt the muscles knot. When I looked down, they were moving under my skin. Not now. Please, not now. I took a deep breath. Nothing to worry about. This had happened before and it didn't go anyplace. The only time I had shape-shifted, I'd been asleep. Just ignore it and focus. My legs gave way, like someone yanked them from under me. I crashed to the ground. What was that? The man said. Deer, probably, Dr. Inglis said. But go check it out. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't obey. The muscles kept spasming and seizing, and it was all I could do to keep from gasping. Still, I managed to pull myself deeper into the undergrowth. Nothing, the man said. I collapsed, body convulsing, the world going dark as my mind slid toward unconsciousness. No, please no. Not now. Please not now. I panted for air, my body racked with sudden fever. I tugged at my shirt. Right. I had to get my clothing off. If I was going to shapeshift, I had to get everything off, and it gave me something to focus on, to stay conscious. Undressing wasn't easy. The signals from my brain seemed to short out on the way to my hands and my body kept jerking. When I finally fumbled most of my clothes off, I blacked out. I came to, stretching, body aching. When I reached out a hand and saw a paw instead, I leaped onto all fours and peered through the trees, heart pounding, certain I'd see an empty driveway. The van was still there. I lowered myself to my belly and crept through the undergrowth. Really have to get going, Dr. Inglis was saying. I don't want those boys waking up. Let me check in with the team one more time. I reached the tree line and looked out. How was I going to rescue anyone now? I couldn't open the van door. I couldn't slash the van's tires. I stopped and lifted a paw. My claws shot out. I let out a soft chuff. That made it easy. I started forward, gaze fixed on the rear tire, farthest from where Dr. Inglis and the man stood. I stopped. So I slashed the tires and then what? Fight them all? Including the team out in the woods? Time to reconsider. I retreated to a tree, dug in my claws, and started to climb. I got about 5 feet off the ground before realizing I was forgetting something. I headed back into the woods to get what I needed, then I came out and climbed the tree. There was a branch a few feet from the top of the van, but I went higher, so I'd be hidden. I stretched out on the limb to wait. They're still looking, the man said as he signed off the radio. The boys are going to wake up any second. I know. I told them we're leaving. They can keep looking for the skinwalker girl. Her name is Maya, Dr. Inglis said. The man shrugged. As they got into the van, I crouched on the branch, tail behind me like a tightrope walker's pole. When my balance was right, I leaped, aiming for the limb overhanging the van, but I wasn't that agile yet. I caught the branch, slipped, and struck the roof with a bang as the van started backing up. The driver hit the brakes. I flattened myself on the roof. The man rolled down the driver's window and peered into the side mirror. Dr. Inglis did the same on the passenger's side. Looks like you hit a fallen branch, Dr. Inglis said. Just back over it. The van continued down the lane. Then it turned left, heading back to town. Another turn, onto a dirt road so narrow that evergreen branches steepled over it and I had to flatten out again to avoid getting poked in the eye. I waited until we'd left the other road behind. Then I lifted my big front paw and brought it down on the roof with a thump. When the van didn't slow, I did it again, twice in succession, pounding hard. The driver eased off the gas. Dr. Inglis's window was still cracked open, and her voice came through it. "It's the boys waking up," she said. "Hit the gas, not the brakes." The driver did, the van sailing over the rutted road, me clinging to the top. I thought of another way to get their attention. But could I do it? I wasn't even sure I knew how. I closed my eyes, focused all my energy deep in my gut, and then I let out a scream. A true cougar scream, the nails down a chalkboard wail that sends campers fleeing their tents in the middle of the night. The driver hit the brakes. And I went sailing along the roof, my claws scraping uselessly across the metal, the clothing I'd retrieved fluttering around me, blocking my vision as I tumbled over the front of the van and hit the hard-packed dirt. I lifted my head, dazed, and found myself staring into the grill. The driver slammed the van into reverse and the vehicle jumped back, ready to make a fast getaway. "No!" Dr. Inglis shouted. It could be Maya. The van stopped. It idled there as they argued inside. I heard the word gun, but that was all I caught because as they talked, I was creeping past the van. When I reached the back, I started to run. Dr. Inglis shouted. The doors opened as they leaped out. I didn't go far before I swerved, then ran full tilt at the van, back legs propelling me so fast the road sped by in a blur. Then I launched myself. I didn't think I could make it. Leaping hurdles was one thing. But jumping high enough to land on a van roof? I actually went too high and landed so hard the whole van quaked under me. I planted my paws, lowered my head, looked at the driver, and let out a snarl that sent him stumbling backward. Silver flashed in his hand, but as he raised it, I saw it was just the keys. His other hand was empty. "Don't startle her," Dr. Inglis said. "Don't startle," he squeaked. That's a mountain lion. She has the birthmark. It's Maya. I don't care. It's a mountain lion. I know. Isn't she beautiful? A young cougar in perfect physical condition. Did you see that leap? She must have been riding on the roof earlier. She climbed the tree to get on it. Do you know what that means? Do I care what that? She planned this. There's no loss of cognitive function. She's an intelligent young woman in the body of one of the world's finest predators. This is what we've been working toward. This is everything we've dreamed. I pounced. I hit the driver in the chest and he went down, keys sailing from his hand and landing in the weeds alongside the road. He punched me in the nose. As a human, that would sting. As a cat, it was like a pile drive straight to the brain. I fell back. He started to scramble away. I managed to recover in time to grab his leg and pulled him up short. His hands dug into the dirt as he struggled to get free. Then he lifted a handful of that dirt and tried to throw it in my eyes. I chomped down on his foot. He let out a scream as loud as a cougar's. Blood filled my mouth, rich and coppery and hot. A gun fired. I let go and wheeled to see Dr. Inglis holding a rifle. "Please, Maya," she said. "These aren't tranquilizer darts. We don't have any with us. I don't want to shoot you. Can you understand me?" I snarled at her. "Everything's gone wrong," she said. "I told them we needed to tell you all the truth sooner. I said the early symptoms had begun and you'd figure it out, but the Saint Clouds wanted to fly in themselves to be there when we broke the news. They hesitated and others took advantage. Others who don't care about you the way we do. I glanced back at the man on the ground, clutching his bleeding foot. I snarled again. He's not one of us, she said. He's St. Cloud security. A nobody. The people who count are the people from the lab, from Salmon Creek. We care about you and we are going to make sure your lives change as little as possible, and only for the better. I looked at her. She seemed sincere, which meant she didn't know about the deal the St. Clouds made with the Nasts giving us away. Or maybe she thought it was a ploy, one they wouldn't go through with. I knew better. These were businessmen. She was a scientist, which made her as much of a nobody as the man I'd bitten. We'll make sure you're taken care of, she continued. Make sure you get back to a normal life. All of you. Just like Salmon Creek, only someplace else. They've already found a new location. But you have to show them that you won't fight them. That they don't need men like him. She waved at the security guy. You need to come with me, Maya. Stop fighting and trust us. I don't want to hurt you. She didn't. I could see that in her eyes. And I could see it in the way the gun now dangled at her side. I tilted my head and studied her. Then I started lowering myself to the ground. Good. Thank you, Maya. Wheel. I pounced. THRTY4. Dr. Inglis staggered back, gun still clutched in her hand. It fired. The shot went wild. I hit her and we went down. Her head struck a half-buried rock. Hit it hard. Her eyes widened, and she collapsed, unconscious. I nudged her. Even opened my mouth and wrapped my jaws around her throat and dented her skin with my fangs. When she didn't move, I let go. I picked up the gun in my mouth and moved it into the long grass, out of her reach. I turned to see the man inching back toward the other side of the road. Looking for something else tossed into the weeds. The keys. He was on his stomach. I walked over, caught him by the collar and dragged him off the road. As I did, I could smell the blood, could see it stretching in a trail behind us. He struggled feebly at first, then stopped, and when I dropped him and looked into his face, his skin pale, pupils dilated, breathing shallow, I knew he was going into shock. I looked at his foot. It was covered in blood. How hard had I bitten him? Harder than I meant to. And what would he have done to me? Worse. That's how I had to think of it. As I was wondering how I'd get the van open without hands, my paws started to throb, as if telling me hands were coming soon. The shift back was easier. Probably because I passed out faster. When I came to, Dr. Inglis was still unconscious on the road. I scooped up the keys. As for my clothing, all I could see right away was my t-shirt and panties. Good enough for now. I was still tugging my shirt down as I opened the back doors of the van. A thump sounded from within. Then, before I could even see inside, Corey said, "Don't. It's Maya." I flung open the door to see Corey holding Daniel by the back of the shirt. In one hand, Daniel held what looked like a shard of metal. He let out a relieved sigh and dropped it. "How'd you know it was me?" I said. Corey shrugged. "Good guess." His gaze shunted to the side, and I knew it wasn't a guess at all. No time to ask. I looked in the van. I couldn't see anyone else, but I looked anyway. "Rafe's not here," Daniel murmured. "They must have taken him with Sam and Kenji." "So you rescued us on your own?" Corey said. "Yes," I said. You were saved by a girl. Horrible, isn't it? He slid out and looked down at my bare legs. Not just a girl, but a half-naked one. Now that's hot. If I'm still unconscious, don't wake me, okay? I rolled my eyes and waved them out, then went to find the rest of my clothing. The guys had been bound, but only loosely, Dr. Inglis apparently not wanting them to get injured on the ride. While I'd been fighting, they'd gotten free. We used the ropes to tie up Dr. Inglis and the security guy, who had also passed out. We made their bindings light. We wanted to delay their return to town, not leave them in the woods to die. I wrapped the man's foot, but that was the best I could do. We took their radios and left. As we climbed into the van, all three of us in the front, I told Daniel they'd taken the others to the helipad. I expected him to say we couldn't go there, couldn't try to save them, but he just nodded and said, "Then that's where we're going," and started the van. We parked at the ruins of a cottage that had been abandoned years ago, then we slipped through the forest to the far end of town, to the helipad on top of the laboratory. I knew we were too late when I heard the hoop-hoop of the helicopter preparing for liftoff. We ran behind the town hall. There was a fire escape around back. As kids we used to dare each other to climb it and spy on Corey's mom, always hoping to see some big arrest in progress. There wasn't even a jail cell in the tiny police station. But we'd always hoped anyway. Now I swung onto that ladder and climbed. Hiding behind the roof peak, I peered out to see the helicopter lift from the pad. I could make out figures inside. At least 3 heads, plus the pilot. Someone with dark hair was sitting beside the rear window. The figure turned. It was Rafe. He shielded his eyes and he seemed to be looking straight at me. I raised my hand. He raised his. His lips moved, but there was no way I could tell what he was saying. Then another figure leaped across his lap, long black hair swinging. "Annie!" She waved frantically, grinning, then disappeared, pulled away by Rafe, quieting her. I pushed to my feet as the helicopter rose. Rafe reappeared. He flashed 4 fingers, then a thumbs up, and I knew that meant everything was all right, or as all right as it could be, that he was okay and Annie was okay, and so were Sam and Kenji. Then, with one last lurch, the helicopter lifted off. We took Mrs. Tilson's car. We didn't dare use the van, in case it had a GPS. Maybe the car did, too. Not much we could do about it. We still had our money, but our bags were lost. Again, nothing we could do. Daniel headed for Nanaimo. I stared out the window, lost in thought. "What did he give you?" Daniel asked. I glanced over at him. Rafe. He put a paper in your pocket before he left. Was it anything important? I'd forgotten all about it. I jammed my hand into both my pockets, certain the note had fallen out. It hadn't. The paper was just folded into a small square and shoved deep. It was actually printouts. 2 pages. Watermarked confidential. Rafe must have grabbed them when he was taken captive the first time, I said. Daniel had told Corey about this earlier on the drive. They're memos about an escape. Corey leaned over to read them. Not our escape, though. Does that say Buffalo? Daniel looked over sharply. Buffalo. I nodded. It's about the experiment that went wrong. Project Genesis. Details of what happened. And what happened? Corey said. I had to finish reading the first page before I could answer. Then I explained. As we'd guessed, Project Genesis was another experiment with genetically modified supernaturals. Only these ones seemed to be normal types. Well, normal in the sense that we'd heard about them before. Witches, sorcerers, half-demons, werewolves, and something called necromancers. I've seen them in video games, Corey said. They control the dead. Zombies. I said. Right. As supernatural types went, that seemed weird, and I suspected there was more to it. According to the notes, some of the kids had problems. So they locked them up in a group home. The kids figured out why they were there and escaped. And apparently came back and destroyed the laboratory, killing Dr. Davidoff and several others. Why can't we do that? Corey said. Because we don't know where to find anyone, I said. Even if we did, we aren't ready for that. They had help. A father and an aunt who'd been in on the experiments. So what happened? Corey asked. And what does this have to do with us? I read the second page. Then I told him. We ditched the car in one of the big shopping plazas in Nanaimo's north end. From there, we'd hop a city bus to the ferry. Before that, though, I found a payphone. I put in my money and dialed my grandmother's number in Skydgate. It rang 4 times. I knew the machine was going to pick up, and as I waited, I considered what I'd say. I had to make sure she knew it was me, not some ghoul pretending to be her dead granddaughter. I couldn't give any information about where I was. I just wanted to get a message to my parents that I was okay. I imagined what would happen then. I imagined them confronting the St. Clouds, demanding to know where I was, accusing them of lying and threatening to call the authorities. I imagined how the St. Clouds would react to that. My grandmother's voice invited me to leave a message. I closed my eyes and listened to her. As I hung up, I whispered I love you. Then I went back to the guys. We splurged in the gift shop, buying hoodies. Then we split up to buy the ferry tickets, and didn't reunite until the boat left the harbor. We stood on the back deck, watching our island fade into the mist. When it disappeared, I took out the notes from Rafe again and reread the second page details on the subjects who'd escaped. Rafe had added notes at the bottom, about a real contact his mother had given him. He might know more, he'd written. Find him. Then find them. Find them, I whispered, shaking my head. How do we find them if the St. Clouds can't? Daniel put his arm around my shoulders as we leaned over the railing, cold mist spattering our faces, our island long vanished. We try. I leaned against him and nodded. Try. That was all we could do. And we would. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.